When you play an open-world video game, you feel like you're making autonomous choices, but eventually you hit an invisible wall. Your freedom is limited by the boundaries of the code someone else wrote. Human life operates on a similar hidden architecture. The desires you feel and the anxieties you harbor are scripted by an underlying structural reality. Jacques Lacan set out to map this architecture. He treated the human mind as a topological science rather than a collection of self-help tips. At the center of his model is the big other, represented by the math theme, capital A. It is not a literal person or a physical institution like a government or a church. It is the virtual locus of language, law, and social custom. It is the symbolic framework you were born into. To speak or act at all, you are forced to use its pre-written mechanics. By graphing this framework, Lacan showed that our most intimate desires are actually public phenomena. This explains why we often comply with social systems even when we are consciously cynical about them. Lacan separated the little other from the big other. The little other, lowercase a, is the domain of the ego. It begins in the mirror stage, where a child identifies with a unified visual image to mask their physical fragmentation. Interactions on this level are dualistic and competitive. By comparing yourself to a reflection or a rival, you are trapped in a cycle of narcissistic aggression. This diagram highlights the shift. On the left is the symmetrical loop of the ego. On the right is the triadic network of the symbolic big other. The big other breaks the ego's loop, mediating human relations through the shared rules of language. This submission to the big other is a requirement for subjectivity. Without it, human beings remain in an animalistic state of pure rivalry. Subjectivity begins with biological helplessness. An infant is driven by organic requirements, like hunger, which Lacan calls need. To survive, the infant translates those needs into vocalized demand, forcing raw requirements into the linguistic code of the big other. Every demand has a double function. It asks for physical food, but also functions as an absolute demand for recognition. When the physical need is satisfied and removed from the equation, a structural remainder is left behind. This residue is desire. Mathematically, desire is demand minus need. Desire is born in the gap created by language. This is why Lacan famously stated that man's desire is the desire of the other. Your wanting is activated by the rules of the social matrix. The graph of desire maps exactly how this linguistic alienation shapes human intentionality. This horizontal vector is the diachronic signifying chain, the flow of language. The horseshoe-shaped vector traces the subject's path, beginning as a pre-linguistic entity and crossing language to emerge as a split subject. At this first intersection, the subject's raw speech is submitted to the big other's treasury of signifiers. The second intersection is the quilting point. Meaning is established retroactively. When the sentence stops at the quilting point, the sense of the earlier words is locked into place backward through the chain. This proves the subject does not own their own meaning. Unconscious sense is an illusion created by the intersections of the big other. Structural dominance applies to the visual field with the same rigor it applies to language. Jean-Paul Sartre proposed the look, where you're caught by a literal person, like a voyeur hearing footsteps. You feel shame because an individual sees you. Lacan's gaze is different. It's an unlocatable feeling that the symbolic order is perceiving you from all sides. You feel watched by the visual world itself, even when no one is present. Slavoj Žižek applied this omnipresent gaze to how modern subjects handle the weight of ideology. Through interpassivity, we displace our beliefs and emotions onto a proxy, a subject supposed to believe. Canned laughter on a sitcom is a perfect example. The machine laughs for you. You sit unamused while the television performs enjoyment on your behalf. This allows you to maintain cynical distance. You can roll your eyes at the system, but as long as the big other holds your belief, your structural compliance remains intact. Graph 4 maps conscious statements alongside hidden enunciation. At the top is the S of A bar may theme. The slash marks the big other as incomplete. There is no ultimate authority to guarantee our symbolic world. The structure is built around a void. Analysis handles this reality in 3 stages. First, the subject integrates their history into full speech. Second, the subject accepts symbolic castration, the loss required to participate in the symbolic register. Finally, the subject traverses the fantasy, realizing that their desired objects were only props masking the lack in the big other. The goal is not a stronger ego, but the realization that the authority of the big other is empty. This frees the subject from seeking validation from a flawed system. Shoshana Zuboff uses the term big other to describe the data surveillance networks of platform capitalism. Zuboff's big other is a material apparatus of servers. Lacan's big other is virtual. When you post online, you aren't interacting with physical hardware. You are performing for an abstract public opinion that exists in your head. Algorithmic governmentality attempts to bypass the symbolic dimension. It aims to predict our needs before we ever formulate a demand. Human desire is defined by the gap between need and demand. If predictive algorithms eliminate that gap by satisfying us perfectly, the distance required for a human subject to exist disappears. True freedom relies on the code being incomplete.